All right, let's get right into this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the exact psychological mechanisms that make us, all of us, so incredibly susceptible to believing false information. Look, we live in an era where misinformation spreads way faster than the truth, and we're going to look under the hood to figure out why. We aren't just looking at the media we consume, we're actually looking at our own biology to understand how a complete lie physically cements itself as reality in our minds.
You know, George Orwell's 1984 warned us about doublethink, that habit of just impudently claiming that black is white, right in contradiction to plain facts. But here's the wild part. What Orwell imagined as this dystopian top-down political mandate, it actually taps into very real, very vulnerable cognitive shortcuts that our brains are using every single day.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, the post-truth brain. Second, the illusory truth effect. Third, source monitoring errors. Fourth, partisan-motivated reasoning. And finally, number 5, warning labels and solutions.
Okay, Section 1. The post-truth brain, navigating the information chaos. Let's be real. Our modern media diet absolutely bombards us with a level of digital noise our brains were frankly never built to handle. We evolved in small tribes, right? Information was scarce and mostly passed down through trusted, direct experience. Today, we are entirely post-scarcity when it comes to information.
Moving right along to Section 2, the illusory truth effect, the power of repetition. To filter this modern tsunami of information, we heavily rely on cognitive shortcuts, and one of the absolute most powerful is how simple repetition completely bypasses our logical processing. Let's talk about the illusory truth effect. When you're exposed to a piece of information multiple times, your brain processes it much more smoothly. Psychologists call this concept fluency. It's almost like you can imagine a clean brain graphic lighting up in specific neural regions. That fluency is just the ease by which a statement travels through those neural networks. This feeling of ease actually creates a false signal of truth. The brain essentially goes, hey, this is easy to process, so it must be accurate. And astonishingly, decades of research show this happens even if you previously knew the statement was completely false.
Think about what happens when we're relentlessly bombarded by overlapping text. Just endless headlines transitioning quickly across our screens, some true, some completely fabricated. It successfully hacks what's called our Bayesian belief updating. In a perfectly rational world, you update your beliefs based on the actual credibility of a new signal. But in a noisy world, familiarity becomes the signal. You literally start assigning greater credibility to a completely baseless claim simply because you've seen it echoing across different platforms.
Which brings us to Section 3. Source monitoring errors. Where did I hear that?
The crucial point here is that your brain is fantastic at remembering a shocking story, but it's actually terrible at remembering whether you saw that story happen in reality or just read it in some random social media comment. This is a lapse in your reality monitoring mechanism. At the exact moment you recall a memory, specific neural regions light up, trying to guess its source. But that source code, it isn't permanently attached to the data.
Just picture media screens flashing rapidly in front of you. That rapid-fire cognitive overload of our social feeds provides the absolute perfect recipe for false memories. Because real memories usually have texture, visual richness, and a high emotional charge, when you see an emotionally charged, highly visual fake video on your timeline, your brain encodes it as a personal experience. Later on, just a simple leading question can easily trigger the misinformation effect, causing you to confidently recall details that were never even there to begin with.
And the real-world stakes here? They are incredibly high. We aren't just talking about winning petty arguments on the internet. A landmark study documented 35 innocent people who were wrongfully sent to death row, only to be later exonerated by DNA evidence, solely due to the source monitoring errors of well-meaning eyewitnesses. Human memory is basically a leaky bucket, and the consequences of its failure can be fatal.
All right, on to Section 4. Partisan-motivated reasoning, the ultimate bias.
So this is partisan-motivated reasoning. Emotional, identity-driven signals can completely override your logical reality monitoring. When we see a headline from a source that aligns with our political tribe, and by the way, whether you lean left or lean right, this affects absolutely everyone exactly the same, we assign it massive credibility. Why? Well, agreeing with our group generates a positive emotional response, causing specific neural regions to light up and making that source feel safer and more trustworthy, completely regardless of the actual facts.
Now we gotta ask the big question. In the ultimate battle of cognitive biases, which one actually dominates our perception of fake news? If you see a fabricated headline repeatedly, does the illusory truth effect win?
or does your political identity filter it out?
A massive 2024 study by Ventura, Bisbee, and Graham used actual headlines from networks all across the political spectrum, and the results were pretty staggering. Whether a headline is conservative or liberal, our ideological alignment shapes our belief far more powerfully than just seeing a headline repeatedly. In fact, partisan-motivated reasoning dominates the illusory truth effect by 1.5 to 5 times. A completely fabricated headline from a source you agree with has an overwhelmingly high chance of being accepted as pure truth.
So what do we do about it? Section 5, Warning Labels and Solutions, Reclaiming Reality.
Researchers tested what happens when you apply a simple warning label, just something indicating that a claim's veracity is disputed, to these false headlines. And the good news is, the intervention actually works. A warning label successfully cuts the power of partisan-motivated reasoning, and it slices the illusory truth effect by more than half, specifically for headlines from sources you agree with. It basically acts as a cognitive speed bump, forcing your brain out of its automatic fluency mode and back into critical thinking.
On a personal level, there's a shockingly simple tool you can use to cut through the noise. Keep a journal. Because we know that source monitoring errors happen at the exact moment of recollection, simply writing things down physically anchors your reality. It stops the emotional manipulation of those rich visual digital feeds from retroactively rewriting your memory. I'm going to leave you with this final thought. You now know that your brain uses repetition to fake fluency, it detaches sources from memories, and it fiercely prioritizes political identity over undeniable facts. So knowing exactly how your brain is wired to believe the lie, how will you monitor your own information diet today? I really encourage you to take a step back from the rapidly flashing screens, be deeply, intensely skeptical of headlines that just perfectly validate your worldview, and actively protect your own post-truth brain.